Let's talk to Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, a man who knows a thing or two about history. He's an historian, in fact, senior fellow at the New Culture Forum as well. Rafe, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Great to be with you. Good
to see you. I hope you've recovered from the setting up of the Christmas tree lights at Downing Street last night.
I loved your impression. It sounded like George from Rainbow, actually, your impression of Keir Starmer.
Well, I mean, just, you know, can you imagine Lord Ali popping in for the sort of Christmas celebrations? But anyway, how on earth have we got it? Funnily enough, I saw Emma Wolf put out a tweet yesterday saying this time last year, she was on The Talk, the show that used to be on TalkTV, talking about the Elgin Marbles, right? And it suddenly struck me as a huge coincidence that here we are about to talk about them again because Keir Starmer might be on the brink of giving them away.
Yeah, well, I mean, no surprise here, right? This is a government that places its own ideology ahead of Britain's national interest. You know, the most visible example to date has been giving the Kyriakos Islands away, a huge strategic error, annoying our greatest ally, America, hugely, and giving essentially carte blanche for China to now become dominant in that region, you know, simply to advance an ideological motive. Yeah. And here again, it's the same thing. This idea that you have to return artifacts to where they came from. You know, there is a British Museum Act that preserves the integrity of the British Museum because these are world's encyclopedic museums. The Louvre in Paris, the Met in New York, the British Museum. These are places where the world's great treasures can be put on display for the world to see them, where we can compare and contrast different civilizations. And it's quite a retrograde thing for the left, who are normally internationalists. They hate nationalism, except when it attacks Britain.
Yes.
And so they're supporting the Greek nationalists.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's very ironic, isn't it? And, of course, one of the reasons as well, and I don't wish to sound in any way xenophobic here, but one of the reasons that many of these treasures are still in existence and are still actually able to be seen is because they were sort of rescued, if you like, for the British public to be held in security in a British environment. I mean, look at what happened when ISIS decided to blow the hell out of various different sort of, you know, antiquities in the Middle East. And look at what the Taliban did when they blew up all sorts of things in Afghanistan. And suddenly those things don't exist anymore and they can't be seen.
Yeah, xenophobic is a Greek word there, has to be said. But yes, you're absolutely right. You know, first the thing to remember is, you know, if it wasn't for Lord Elgin, the Elgin Marbles probably wouldn't exist today. Right. You know, over half of them had been destroyed by the time Lord Elgin arrived there. There was no Greek state at the time. Greece is a 19th century modern construct. He purchased them legally from the Sultan. They then were transported to Britain, and the British government, uniquely for the early 19th century, held a parliamentary inquiry into whether these were legally acquired, and it found that they were legally acquired. And as you said, they put them on display, and it was only when they were actually on display in the British Museum that the world finally recognized these artifacts for the great treasures that they actually are.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the British Museum should have a permanent display about how Britain, France, and Germany rediscovered ancient civilization. Right. From India to Africa, you know, the Sanskrit language, even the Indian origins of Buddhism, for example. It was Europeans who went to parts of the world where they had no interest in their own culture and history, and they preserved them for global heritage.
Exactly.
And so these are now part of world heritage, which is why they are in these world encyclopedic museums. I mean, the idea that you can only go to Greece or Egypt to see Greek or Egyptian treasure seems like a very retrograde step. You want the most people to be able to see these things. Very few people go to Cairo or to Athens. You know, you have, I think, 6 times more people going to the British Museum than go to all of Egypt's museums combined.
Right, exactly. And also for those same people who complain and, as you say, support nationalism, as long as it's not British nationalism, are also the same people that tell us not to fly anywhere. So, you know, you won't be allowed to go to Greece to see the Elgin Marbles or indeed to Egypt to see the pyramids, because that will be too, you know, ecologically expensive.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You know, they're tying themselves up in knots in terms of the, you know, the logic just doesn't fall through on any of these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, we just simply have to realize that, you know, our institutions are being attacked from within. We've got the most woke curators. They're being attacked from without by countries demanding the return of these sorts of things. And we need a government that actually stands up for British interests and for the British people. Because if we allowed museum curators to have the say in all of this, they would empty all of our museums now.
Right. Well, I was slightly perturbed, and I don't know if he's still in charge of it, but when I discovered that the British Library, which has been sort of decolonising itself for about the last 2 years, is being run by a bloke from Dresden in Germany. And I thought, well, maybe that's not perhaps the greatest choice of a curator for a place which is supposed to be preserving British heritage.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, this is happening across all of our institutions now. We've got people coming from parts of the world also, you know, if they're coming from India and other countries where they have a very much a post-colonial anti-British attitude. And now this has infected all of our institutions. I went to the Bank of England Museum recently. They have a permanent display on slavery there. You know, you just can't escape this. What on earth does slavery have to do with the Bank of England, you know? And this, unfortunately, has gone through all of our institutions. You go to the Imperial War Museum now. A great part of it is taken up by exhibitions on refugees, for example. Right. There's no escaping, you know, the woke long march through our institutions. And unfortunately, you know, librarians and museum curators, that used to be, when I was a child, they were the most timid people in the world. Yes. They are now the Praetorian Guard. You know, they're the Amazonian warriors of the woke movement.
Indeed. Kenny from Edinburgh says, how can Starmer find a way to return the Elgin Marbles to their place of origin, but he can't return migrants to theirs? It's quite a good point. You know. Also, in the Bank of England Museum, was there any reference to the world-famous economist Rachel Reeves?
Yeah, I think she's on the cloakroom attendant there. I think there's someone called Rachel Reeves there, isn't that what she handles complaints for the British Bank of England Museum?
Yes, brilliant, absolutely great. Great to see you, Rafe. We're sure we'll see you in the studio soon. Thank you very much indeed. Rafe Heydel-Mankoo, historian and broadcaster, on the ludicrous state of affairs